Welcome to the A to Z of Godly Relationships podcast. It's good to have you back with us. And today we have a very, very special one for you. Today's podcast is Finding Love When You're a Pastor. Our special guest today is Pastor Kunlé Oyedeji. Welcome, Pastor Kunlé.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Honestly, it's so good to be able to have this interview. I know this is something we've spoken about for a while, and the day has finally arrived when we can actually get together and do it. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely. I'm glad we've been able to get around to it. I'm excited. And again, thank you for having me on.
Great. So let me just introduce you. For those who may not know of you, you are an author. You've written 2 books. One entitled Finding Mr. and Mrs. Right, and the infamous Relationship Matters. I'm sure many have heard of those books and have read them, as have I. Fantastic books, a great guide. You wrote those books when you were single, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And I imagine quite a few people have asked, how did you manage to write a book on relationships when you were single? And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that later. But I also want to add that you are the pastor of the Cornerstone Church in London and have been for the last 6 years. And you're also the founder of the Empowerment Group, which is a counselling service for BME. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. So 6 years now we've been running at the Cornerstone Church. And I've had the privilege and honor of leading that church over the course of founding and leading that church over the course of the 6 years till date. And as you rightly mentioned, I'm also the founder and CEO of the Empowerment Group, which offers one-to-one counseling sessions, up to 10 free one-to-one counseling sessions for BME individuals.
And does that counselling cover all realms? Is it everything, relationship, mental health, past experiences, that sort of thing? Is it everything that you cover?
Absolutely. It's professional counselling. So it's there's a team of us of BME, BACP accredited, qualified counsellors who deliver counselling in various areas with, extremely amount of, I don't even know how many years, I was trying to do the maths in my head, but so many years of experience in counselling, just really helping the BME community, as the BME community does suffer from mental health challenges quite disproportionately compared to other races.
I can feel another podcast coming on. I can feel us having a conversation and digging a bit deeper into this. But today I'm going to focus on because we want to know how you found love as a pastor. And spoiler alert, he has done. So if you had, any ideas, you can probably log off now because he has found love. But we want to know the journey. So I mentioned before about you writing 2 books on relationships in your singleness. Can I ask you, where did the wisdom for the content of those books come from?
Yeah, sure. So typically one of the questions I'm actually always asked is, and people always tell me that they are asked, how can he write a book on relationships when he's not married? To which I reply, I don't write books on marriage, I write books on relationships. And the wisdom comes from relationships I've experienced, relationships that others have experienced, and general studies on relationships, both from a psychological point of view as well as a spiritual point of view as well. So really that's where a lot of the wisdom has been gained over the years, which has allowed me to transfer that into writing to be a blessing to many.
Right. Okay. And, when we ask God for wisdom, he gives it to us, right? So I don't know if you intentionally ask God for wisdom in that area, but I think from being under your word, listening to you speak and the wisdom that came from you, I met you, I was already married when I met you. And so listening to you speak about relationships when you were single, there's definitely a wisdom that comes from God that has been, passed on through you. So I have to say, I often hear people talking about relationships or marriage or both, and thinking, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you're on the penny there, but with you, I think there is a lot of wisdom that clearly has to be from God. I want to move on and ask you then, what was it like for you being single and a pastor?
That's an interesting one. I think at first I didn't think anything of it because I guess being in the shoes of a pastor, I'm also a human, and like anyone and everyone else that is seeking love and wanting companionship and wanted to go down that road, I just thought it would be a case of finding someone that's right for me. I didn't actually think at first whether me being a pastor would create any differences, but I think over time I realized that it did when I would go on dates and, you know, there was a reoccurring saying where it was a thing of, I would love to get to know you, but you're a pastor, or I'm interested, but I was a little bit unsure because you're a pastor. And that's when I had to stop and think, okay, what is it about being a pastor that seemed to be putting people off at the time?
That's really interesting, because I imagine it would have been the opposite. I really thought people would be more drawn because you were a pastor. And again, you've given me even more. There's so much more I want to dig into, but I'm not going to jump ahead. Let's pace ourselves. Did you at any point feel pressured to come out of singleness because you were a pastor?
Well, just before I go on to that, off the basis of your last point, actually, it was the two extremes. So let me just add that in there. So there was the extremes of people who wanted to be with me because I was a pastor and they loved the whole idea of, you know, a man of God and someone being in authority and leadership and all of that stuff. That was that extreme. And then there was the other extreme where people were a little bit concerned because I was a pastor. And it was very hard to find the in-between, and eventually I found the in-between, and I let's say I'm happy that I found the in-between per se. But in terms of pressure, I never put pressure on myself. I actually enjoyed being a little different in the respect that a lot of pastors that we encounter do tend to be married, and I liked the whole idea of being different in that regard and being a pastor that was single and really just kind of being an example to others, whether it's writing books on relationships as a single or pastoring a church as a single, that you don't have to wait until, you know, particular things are in place to be used by God or have this image of perfection per se to be able to be used by God. And I enjoyed being that kind of difference, that kind of uniqueness amongst peers in terms of not being married or writing books on relationships as a single. But I think a lot of pressure, or shall I say any pressure that did come, was really from people on the outside looking in who thought, you know what, it would be great for you to get married and, you know, it's ideal and it's the right thing to do and it will help your ministry and all those kind of things, which I appreciate. But actually, I never put the pressure on myself.
Right. Was some of the pressure coming from your mum? I've met your mum. She's lovely. But as a parent, as a mother of a son who is single and eligible and a pastor, did you get any pressure from family, parents, that kind of thing?
Funnily enough, no. So it was a thing of, I think like any mother that wants their son to get married, from time to time, you know, my mum would drop hints, especially growing up in our African household. Your listeners who also come from an African background understand that, you know, it's one of those things that when you're younger, your parents don't want you to think about relationships and marriage. They want you to concentrate on your studies, and, you know, 7 hours after you graduate, it's when you get married. So yeah, it was interesting because my mother would drop hints from time to time, but she never put pressure on me, and she would always say the most important thing is that you get the right person. That was always her prayer. That was always her heart, that, you know what, as much as I would love for you to find someone sooner rather than later, the most important thing is that you find the right person.
That's fantastic. I'm hoping if mum listens to this, thank you, mum. because parents putting pressure can have such an adverse effect. So that's wonderful that you weren't being absolutely pressured. Can I ask you then, did you feel free to date, or did you feel restricted because of your role? I'm going to keep coming back to the fact that you are a pastor, and so I think it adds a different dynamic, and maybe by the end of this podcast I'll be corrected, but I feel like it adds a different dynamic to the already very difficult, or can be difficult, phase of dating. But as a pastor, did you feel free to date, or did you feel more restricted in some way?
I think it was a bit of both. And to give you some context, I think it really depends on where I was and the particular context in which I was looking to date in. So I kind of put strategies in my mind for how I would go about dating in different contexts. So for example, if I was going to date someone in the church that I pastor, as somebody who is, a pastor to the congregation, I would have a different strategy for how I would date outside the church. So for someone in the church, I really put the onus on the female, and I know it sounds weird saying this, but I really put the onus on the female to really be clear with her intentions before I make any move, because I wouldn't want to be in a position where I'm kind of, quote unquote, pursuing someone in the church. They feel uncomfortable and perhaps don't know how to say no, and thinking, but this is my pastor, and how am I going to respond to that, and it's going to be awkward. So my strategy was, if I'm going to date someone in the church, it has to be very clear. That female has to be very intentional, very open to a degree about her interest, for me to be able to match that and know that, okay, this is something to possibly pursue. But my mind, if I'm being honest, wasn't really thinking about dating in the church. I wasn't against it at any time, but I wasn't really thinking about dating within the church. I think outside of the church, it really depended on who I met and where. So I'd meet friends at, games nights and mutual gatherings that I've been invited to and things like that. And talking to someone in that context, getting to know them, not a problem. But if they knew me already, and knew I was a pastor, it did have a little bit of a added pressure to it, I would say. And it was always something that would come up quite early in the discussions that I had with anyone that might be interested in me or that I was interested in. It was kind of like, let's get the elephant out of the room, which is surprising when I look back. But as I say, I think there were the two extremes. For some people, it wasn't a problem at all. For others, it was, we need to talk about this from early on.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Did you try any other forms of dating? Did you try online dating? Were you happy to be introduced by other people? I think your last answer probably explains that one. Were you very active? I know you did a talk for us, our singles ministry. You came along and you did a talk on being intentional about dating. And I think at that stage where you did that talk, you were in that stage yourself, where you had become intentional. So did you try all forms of dating, of meeting people?
Well, funnily enough, actually, thinking about that question and linking it to the last question you asked as well. So I came and spoke for you, and I spoke about being intentional and the like. That was another atmosphere. So not necessarily your church, but actually speaking out. That was another great opportunity to meet people. But again, I was always conscious of, I'm the host's guest, and I don't want to come across as I've come on a particular assignment duty as a guest speaker, and here I am now talking to the women in the church or that kind of thing. So that was another environment that was tricky for me. But I was intentional about dating at particular stages. There were stages, I think, like a lot of single people, where you just kind of sit back. There are other stages where you're like, que sera, sera. And then there's other stages where you're like, actually, I'm going to be intentional about actually dating. And so I didn't try online. I was always, I had conversations with close friends about it. I was always conscious of branding, if I'm being honest, and what it would look like for the senior pastor of a church to be on a dating website looking for a wife. I just didn't like the whole idea of the branding behind that for the purposes of the church. I'm not against online dating, but also as well, I did wonder if perhaps I might even attract the wrong type of woman as a pastor on there. I could be wrong, but I didn't try online dating as we know it per se in terms of online dating websites, but I did use things like social media to keep my eye out. So, if I saw someone that, came across well on social media, I would inquire, and I did that once, and as a result of that, I'm no longer single.
Wow. Oh, you've answered another one of my questions, but that's amazing. That's amazing. Do you know what's interesting? I've come across, when we do our pre-marriage courses, for example, we always ask people how they meet, and more people are saying online or via social media. And that's one thing I would love to be able to say to the listeners out there is making sure that your social media represents you, because there may be posts on there from 4, 5, 15 years ago that are not quite the person you are now. And how do you want to be portrayed? How do you want to be seen? Because people are looking. I mean, employers are looking. So you can bet that people who are looking for relationships are also looking. And what I find is a lot of people putting so much on display that I don't know if, as a male, and I can't speak for a male, you can, but as a male, I don't know if I'd be more attracted or more put off by the fact that my prospective spouse has got everything on display, whether it's, and even as a woman, when you see some of the guys that have everything, all the abs are out, everything's displayed, would I want that person to now become my husband or wife? How do you feel about some of the things that you saw on social media?
You know what? I think you're spot on. And I think we sometimes within church circles try to get a little bit over spiritual about it. And we say things like, well, they shouldn't judge me by my Facebook profile or my Instagram photos. But the reality is, we've always heard it said, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And in any other sphere, whether we're going to an interview, whether we're going to do a business pitch, a presentation, we always put on a particular side of us that we want people to see. And I think it should be the same when it comes to social media. I think we all know that social media isn't a reality, but I think it gives us an inkling into someone's personality, depending on what they post and how they post it, and even sometimes how often they post. And I was definitely of the mindset that if a woman was posting and everything was out there, it was definitely for me, and I can say for a lot of guys, it was a put off. I think there's two types of guys. There's the type of guys that are a little bit sleazy. They want to see that stuff because that's all they're after, and they typically will, slide in the DMs, and that's what they're pursuing. And then I think there's the other type of guys where it's like, actually, we don't want to see everything. And for me, one of the big things that I was looking out for was modesty, and that was such an important thing for me. And I think people need to realize that how they present themselves on social media does create an impression in the minds of others.
So quick fire round for you now that consists of one question. You go on social media and there is females posting and their cleavage is out, bikinis are on, all that sort of thing. Turn off or turn on?
Definitely turn off.
Thank you. Okay. Just wanted to clear that up. So let's move on then. Now, when we narrow it down now, we're talking about an individual, not your individual person, but an individual. When you're considering a person that you want to potentially grow with or, introduce yourself to even, where others, who are not pastors may consider, for example, the character and the appearance. For you, did you have additional factors because of your calling? Were there other things that you were looking for as well as the normal things that we all look for?
The only other additional thing that I was looking for was somebody who was supportive of what God has called me to. And that was literally it. I just wanted somebody who would understand what I was called to, who wouldn't make me always have to choose between God's work and other things, but would be patient and understanding that this is what they're called to, and just really be supportive of that. And I'm not saying supportive to the extent that I neglect my family, but supportive enough to understand that, certain sacrifices may be made by me, and I might have to give up my time in certain areas, but they would appreciate that what I'm doing is the most valuable work that one could ever do when it comes to souls. And I think there was this misconception that I was looking for your quote-unquote pastor's wife, where it was kind of the opposite. I didn't necessarily want to be with somebody who was also in ministry. I had no problem if they did, but I was equally happy to be with someone who wasn't and isn't in ministry. And I'm sure we would have less conversations at home about church and ministry as a result, and I wouldn't always have to take my work home in that regard. But I think there was that misconception that, perhaps he's looking for this type of woman, and it just wasn't true.
So you mentioned that you met on social media. I would be very curious. I am curious to find out how that came about. Like, what was the process? How specifically did you meet on social media? Was it a case where you just came across her? Did she come across you? Did you slide in the DMs? How did it go?
So, interestingly enough, I was on Instagram, as you do, scrolling through, and I saw this at an event that was posted on someone's wall. And when I looked at the event, I took a screenshot of it. I put it in a WhatsApp group that I had at the time with 3 other friends. So it was just us 4 guys, and we discussed a whole load of things in that group. And I was like, has anyone heard about this event? I didn't realize that these kind of events still took place today. And the event really was about managing the whole process of being single, going into your 30s, and kind of developing in your 30s, and just kind of managing the expectations and everything around that. Targeted to females specifically, but open to men and women. And it wasn't a thing that I was planning to go. I was just curious that these events still took place. And so one of the guys in the group responded and was like, actually, I know the lady that's running the event. And I asked him, okay, who's that? And when he told me, I realized that the lady that was running the event wasn't actually the one who posted it on the wall when I saw it, but was actually on the flyer as a panelist. And typically when you're hosting an event, you can kind of usually tell who the host is of the event. It says host, or their picture's slightly bigger than others.
Right.
This wasn't the case with her. She was just there like a panelist, and the host's picture was bigger. So I thought it was the host's event, and that host was the same person whose wall I saw it on. So I just assumed it was their event. But actually, she was the panelist, and she was the one that was organizing the event. And I just asked, do I know her? Is she on social media? And he got me the social media handle, and I was like, okay.
So let me pause you there. So at that point, when you saw her picture on the flyer, were you already somewhat drawn? You were attracted?
No, and I even tell her till today that it's a good job that I did go on her social media, because I don't think the picture she had on the flyer was the greatest representation of her.
Okay, all right.
And so I went onto her social media page, and I scrolled through a few pictures, and I loved what I saw. I instantly saw someone who I was attracted to. I loved some of the things she posted. I loved the modesty. It was evident that she was a follower of God, loved God. And so I just said to my friend, is she single? To which he responded, I think she is, but I'm not sure. And
but so what made you, can I pause you there again?
Yeah.
I love detail. I'm trying to picture this thing. What made you go into her Instagram account and not the others? What drew you to her?
So what made me actually go into the account was I was just looking to find out a bit more about her as the host of the event. and the fact that she was doing this event. Yeah, and just to see if I knew her or the like. So I wasn't even going in from the perspective of I want to check out more. It was just more so, so this is the lady that's hosting the event. Is she on Instagram? Let me check her out. Let me see what other events she does, if I know her, that kind of thing. But it's when I got to her page that all went out of the window. And I was now looking at the pictures for the purposes of like wanting to know and see more about her.
And what were you seeing? What sort of pictures were there? What was it about the pictures? What made you think, I know I'm trying to sort of make something quite spiritual into something very practical, but I think I like to be able to help the listeners to understand, what made you feel that something was taking place, something was potentially beginning to grow here.
I think initially there was that physical attraction, and then as I continued to scroll, it was some of the things she would post, some of the things she would talk about, those kind of things increased that attraction to her. But I'm very and I don't say this to kind of big up my own self or to boast of myself, but I'm very level-headed. I don't get carried away by that stuff or assume that just because I see this and it's everything that I like, that's the reality, that she's going to be someone that's right for me if she's single. I know that there was still a long way to go in terms of getting to know her and find out more about the things that matter beyond the physical attraction and the things that she posted. But I just loved her style, kind of demeanor, her elegance, her confidence, her meekness that I was able to get from the video clips and the pictures that she posted on our wall.
I'm going to check out her page now, don't you? I need to see what you saw. I'm obviously not going to see it the way you see it, but I think, she may become the example of what it means to post effectively, if you like. Okay, that's fine, great. So then what happens now? You've checked out her page and you like what you've seen. What happens next?
So I asked my friend, is she single? He's like, I'm not sure. I found out for you. But I think my friend thought I was joking because I didn't hear from him for about 4 or 5 days. And so I messaged him back and I was like, what did she say? And he was like, sorry, I didn't think you were serious, or something along those lines. And
so you asked him to find out if she was single?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And I think he just thought I was joking or the like. But when I then asked him a few days later, he was like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't realize," or something along those lines. And then actually asked her, to which he then fed back to me that she is. So I just said to my friend, "Look, could you ask her if it's all right for me to have her number, give her my Instagram page if she wants to check me out and that kind of thing, because I'd love to touch base with her and just to get to know her more."
Yeah. I like it. It's kind of the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
Why did you go down that route and not just send her a direct message?
I think there's a stigma attached to DMs.
Right.
And I think every female has a particular approach to DMs. Some females, because they're used to silly messages coming into their DMs, they don't check any messages at all.
Right.
And then there are some who actually will go through them and kind of phase out the serious ones from the not so serious ones. So I didn't want to just be a message stuck in the inbox. I didn't want to come across as just one of those guys that, just sliding in the DM, which is, isn't a problem if a guy is serious. But I just thought, actually, if a message is going directly to her phone, it's easier to grab her attention rather than waiting for an Instagram message. So what I actually think I did, if I recall, is I initially sent a message saying hi in the DMs. Then I deleted the message and thought, let me try and go directly and just ask my friend if it's all right for her, for me to have her number.
Right. Okay. When you sent that message in her DM saying hi, did you literally just say hi?
No.
Oh, good. Because I think that's probably like the number one turn off for women is when you've got nothing more to say than hi. The impression I get is that you're just saying hi to like 15 different women and seeing which one will respond. Yeah.
No, I totally understand that. Just saying hi would be annoying. I sent a message like, hey, how you doing? I noticed this on your wall and you posted about this, and kind of try to start a conversation
Right.
based on one of her posts. And then I thought, actually, let me just delete it, because I don't know how often she does and doesn't check her Instagram, and if it will be in the the general box, or if it will go directly to the inbox and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And I just thought a direct approach would be better.
Okay, so then she responded to your direct approach?
Not immediately, no. So I asked my friend if it was all right to ask her for the number, and I didn't hear again from my friend for a few days. So I wasn't sure if my friend thought I was joking again. So I asked him, what did she say? And as it turned out, she had seen my friend's message, but hadn't responded because she wanted to take a few days to think about it, and what she tells me now, do her own due diligence.
Right, of course.
And I'm sure that if we ever get to do an interview between us with you, she would tell you about some of the things she was thinking when she saw my wall and my post, and that I thought that I was a pastor, and all of the things that were going through her head. But she took a few days to get back to my friend because she was considering all these friends. Then eventually she was like, yeah, fine. So as it turned out, she had heard of me, she knew of me, she'd attended some of my events several years ago, youth events, but she didn't know me personally, or so we thought. And there's another twist that I have for you as well. So when I actually got her number and I messaged her, she didn't reply me for what I say is a few days. She's saying it's about a day, which made me think, what's the point of giving me your number if you're not interested, kind of thing. But again, she was just thinking through things and doing her due diligence. And then eventually she did respond, and since that response, I think we spoke every single day for the last God knows how many months, right up until where we are now. It was just an overflow of conversation and getting to know each other and progressing from stage to stage. But the reason why I say there's a twist in the story is because when we started courting, I randomly one day went on her Facebook and I don't know why, I just thought, let me press the message box. And I realized when I pressed the message box that we actually had a full-blown Facebook conversation about 11, 12 years ago.
No.
Yeah, that none of us, for the sake of our lives, can actually recall ever having.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
So it's a weird one. We were looking at the conversation, and I was asking her about how her studies were going at the time, and she was telling me about her sister that was getting married, and we were talking like we were friends, but none of us can ever recall having that conversation. It's there in writing in our Facebook inbox, but none of us ever recall how we would have got to the place where we were talking comfortably like that, or like where we knew each other from. So that's the mystery that we hope will become unraveled at some point in future.
That is incredible. Absolutely incredible. As you said it, I just, in my spirit, just feel like God, like, not the right time. He sowed the seed, it was there, but the timing, both of you clearly needed work to do, things to be getting on with. It wasn't his perfect timing. But that is amazing. I'm so glad you've got it in writing, because how wonderful to look back at that and think, where you were at that time, and the fact that you can't remember. I mean, that's incredible. It's probably, maybe it's a good thing. How were you profiling 11 years ago? Was it a good thing?
I was profiling good 11 years ago. I was probably at what I would say, quote unquote, the peak of my youth ministry. I just released my book. I knew a lot of people. I was doing a lot of events. So I don't know if it was a thing. I'm guessing it was probably a thing we met at an event. But I met loads of people at events, and I didn't really necessarily have detailed conversation like that. But it's interesting that you say what you've just said about, in your spirit with the timing and the like, because the mutual friend that we have that gave me her number said the exact same thing when I told him about the message. Just as you said it, he said, I feel like maybe it was a timing thing and God was just doing what he needed to do until the appropriate time. So yeah, it's amazing.
Amazing. Oh, I love that. I have to move on, but I kind of want to stay here. This is good. Were people aware that you had begun dating?
No. So we only told a couple of people that were close to us for accountability purposes. But that was it.
And what was your reasoning behind that?
So I didn't want to put anything out there until I knew we were sure that we wanted to go down this road.
Right.
And when we did go down that road, it was a thing of, and this is how I am naturally as a person, it was a thing of, we're not going to hide it per se, but we're not going to put it out there. So if you see us, if you ask us, and, you know, one lady from my church, I think, bumped into me on our second date, literally bumped into us, and she asked, and I said, yeah, we're dating, so we're just keeping it quiet at this stage. It was a thing where if somebody had asked if you're speaking to someone, or you dating, or the like, which one or two people did, I would say, but I wasn't going to voluntarily put it out there and say, hey, I'm with somebody, or, you know, make it a public thing at that stage.
Right. Now, she didn't attend your church, did she?
No.
So was it a case where she began to come along to the church to kind of see what it was like, and to see you speak, and to be, you know, did she become a groupie?
No, not at all. Not at all. She didn't come to the church until we got engaged. And that was intentional. That was part of the plan. It was the whole idea that when she does come to the church, and when I do eventually introduce her to the church, it would be official in terms of us being engaged, as opposed to, you know, this is my girlfriend or my partner. It was kind of like, when that time comes, it will be, this is my fiance.
And how did your congregation respond?
Oh, it was so funny seeing the faces of shock, because it's come out of nowhere for most of them. A lot of them were overjoyed, jumping up and down. There was a rapturous applause, and people were really excited and happy and pleased for us, and, you know, loved getting to know her and meet her. And since then, she's now popped in to the church bit by bit, and just kind of built more friends in time for that transition.
And how did you introduce her to the church? Did you do it formally? Did you stand her up and say something? How did you do it?
So I had a plan in place where I would stagger it. So I would tell, I actually invited her to one of my leaders' meetings to introduce her to my leaders about 3 months or so before I proposed to her. So I kind of staggered it in terms of, I want my leaders to know first that I'm with someone, and then I'll let the church know when we're engaged. But I didn't tell my leaders when I was engaged. They just knew that I was with someone before anyone did. And, you know, that was the thinking in mind. So when she did come to the church on that day, the leaders knew who she was and so on and so forth. But again, they didn't know that we had just got engaged on the Friday before this Sunday, which she attended. So at the end of the service, me, you know how I am, I can be quite formal. It was just the thing of, I've got one more announcement, guys, take your seats, you know. I want to introduce you to someone that's special to me, someone that you're going to be seeing over the coming days, weeks, months and years, someone who's close to me, dear to me, and I love very dearly. And, I just said, just over 48 hours or so ago, I proposed to my then girlfriend, now fiance, and I wanted to introduce you to her. She was sitting in the crowd next to my mum, and so made her way to the front. And I think that's when everything just kind of, took off in terms of the applause and the surprises and so on and so forth. And she just said hi to the church and, you know, made herself known. And I'll always remember that day.
Fantastic. Did anybody leave the church afterwards? And I say that in a joking way, because in my mind, I'm thinking, if anyone had designs on you being their husband, have they disappeared to your knowledge?
That's an interesting question. It's an interesting question because I'd always been told by pastor friends, get prepared for an exodus when you get engaged. There's always one or two. I didn't believe them, but they told me, they said, listen, you'll be surprised. And it's been tricky because we've been in and out of lockdown. So in terms of people leaving and so on and so forth, you never really know if they've left because they've left or, you know, if it's because of that matter. But I will say that it was very clear that one or two people weren't necessarily as happy for us as the rest of the church were. And that was, you know, kind of picked up. And I don't hear from certain female friends anymore.
So I think we can take it that that's your exodus. That was it.
I think that was it. Yeah, I think there were certain people who I expected a congratulations from or a message from, or that I was just talking with casually, that I don't hear from anymore. And, you know, there's others where I was told, oh, this person was interested in you, but I think I've never spoken to this person in my life. Why they had that in their mind, I don't know. But I think I've noticed now, as time has gone on, the kind of distance that people have put between me and them.
It's interesting because you probably, you know, you may be the last to know, because I never told you, but someone approached me and asked me whether you were available, and had sights on you for one of their friends. And I said, as far as I'm aware, he is still single. And I think she then went back and spoke to her friend, and it just never materialized. But there probably was a fair bit of that going on that you weren't even aware of, to be honest.
So I'm told, yeah. So I'm told. I've had friends tell me recently that actually, before we started talking, they had a friend that inquired, and, you know, they were kind of, you know, doing their due diligence on me and that kind of thing. So I was always told about these people in the distance that never seemed to come forward when I was single. But I think, like a lot of things in life, you know, when you're single, people don't want to say anything or put themselves forward. It's when you're now off the market that these things start coming out. Yeah.
And you know, the enemy has a plan. And so there's a lot of caution to be exercised around that as well. Can I ask you then, I think I know the answer, but can I ask you, when you met her, were you talking to other people as well, which you then had to kind of close those doors, or were you one of those people that would sort of show interest one at a time, and if it didn't work out, then I'll try somebody else further down the line? What was your where were you at the point when you met her?
I'm definitely a one at a time person. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting is that I met her towards the end of the summer, and that same summer I was talking with a friend, getting to know, and we were kind of going back and forth, do we date, do we not date, and it just never materialized. And actually she ended up going to move and work abroad, and even with that I was still open to a long distance thing, which in hindsight wouldn't have worked, especially with the lockdown, but it just never materialized. And it was a thing of, you know, me being interested at times and her not, and her being interested and me not, and going back and forth. And then, as I say, it just never materialized. And after that, I just didn't think anything. I just thought, okay, I'll just keep it moving. But, you know, it was kind of back to square one. And I think it's amazing how God works, because it was only a matter of weeks afterwards before, this whole process of me seeing my fiance online at that time, and the whole process of that starting up. And it's just weird because it came out of nowhere, but it just all progressed so smoothly and nicely. And so I just remember once we started that process, and I think we met up maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks for our first date. Afterwards, everything just seemed to run so smoothly from then that it was just like I didn't need to consider dating anyone else, and, you know, past dating experiences didn't really matter anymore. And I was happy with how we were getting along. And I just remember actually when we met the first time, just seeing her and thinking, wow, like you're actually better looking in real life than you are on your picture. So I was definitely pleased, and we had a real good time.
Good. Quick fire again. With regards to your relationship as it stands now, and I guess in the lead up to your engagement as well, would you say you're more private or more open?
As a whole, or with the relationship?
I think as a whole, with regards to the relationship, are you both very open about your relationship and, happy to talk? I mean, obviously you're sharing with us today, but would you say that you're more private, and like, are you the type of person that prefers to keep your private business private, or are you quite happy for everybody to know that you're together and you're engaged now and, you're making, are you going to be posting color schemes on Instagram about your wedding colors? And, would you prefer to just keep things very private?
I think nothing has changed. I think actually that's not true. I think to an extent we are more open, and we did say that when we're engaged we're being more open because we're both naturally private people, not secret people, just private people. So it wasn't a problem, going down the whole road of privacy when we were dating and courting. So yeah, we both made that agreement. When we're engaged we'll be a bit more open, and we posted openly with each other and about each other online. But as a whole, again, we're still those kind of people who won't necessarily go and tell people, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing, this is who we are, unless we're asked.
Okay. So I would say it's leaning slightly more towards private, but with openness where necessary. Okay. Yeah. Do you protect her from the full reality of your ministry, or do you give her full exposure so she can get a full picture of what being, she's going to become the wife of a pastor and all that encompasses? Or are there parts that you'd rather her not that you're lying to her, but you don't quite want to expose her to it right now because it could scare her off maybe?
I drip feed her things. Bit by bit, but we've had a lot of conversation about the differences from the church she's coming from to the church she's joining, and just really the different cultures and age ranges and some of the challenges that she may experience and encounter coming from her church to our church. But I haven't poured it all out on her, and I think bit by bit we discuss certain things, I drip feed her things, and there'll be part of it that I'll just leave for her to experience and for us to journey together in as well.
And I guess being the pastor of the church, there was never the question of which church you guys would settle in, because for some couples who meet outside of their church, if you like, there is that question of, well, where will we worship together? I guess it was an absolute given that she would come along to yours because you're the head pastor there. Was there any issues around that? Was that difficult for her to grasp?
No, not at all. She knew what the case would be, though funnily enough, during one of our marriage prep classes, they did say, to all of the couples, you need to discuss what church you're going to go to when you get married, to which I responded and laughed and said, well, I can't leave my church. But she always knew that would be the case because I'm the senior pastor in the church. And it's quite funny because now that you ask me, I'm reminded of a lady who's quite known in the social media world, actually. And she actually told me one time she was interested in me, but she would want me to leave my church to attend her church. And I just laughed. I found that funny.
Okay. That wasn't meant to be.
No.
I don't know if many know, obviously most people probably are not aware of who we're even speaking about, but I know that her father was or is a pastor. Was that a deciding factor for you? Did that help you to decide that she was the one because she'd been exposed to that side of things?
No. I think that helped her understand what she was getting into with me, and I think it helped her and me in terms of her knowing the type of woman I was looking for, and me seeing the character traits, the values and characteristics and qualities that she had that I needed. So I think it helped her in terms of her knowing what it means to, from looking at, her family dynamics, what it means for her dad to be a pastor and what it would be like being with a pastor, but it wasn't a deciding factor for me.
Right. Okay. And how do you, as you've mentioned, you're engaged now, in the run up to the decision, because I'd imagine it wasn't a spontaneous moment where you decided, right, this is it, and I'm going to pop the question. I'd imagine that built up within you. But in that run up to the moment where you proposed, what were your feelings and your thoughts?
As somebody who's written in the area of relationships and has spoken quite frequently on the area, I never knew that I would have that anxiety that comes with such a big decision and, kind of that next phase. I just assumed that I'd be comfortable with it, but I did get anxious about it. I did think, wow, this is a big decision and commitment to make. And I later on found out in speaking to other wise people such as yourself and other friends and leaders and pastors that are close to me, that this was a normal thing for some people to have. That really just helped me be at peace. But I was just thinking about really making this decision, being committed to the decision, and just kind of what the future would look like in terms of us building and living life together, and have been excited about that ever since.
Do you feel that there's a pressure on you as the man? Because the church teaches that the man is the head of the home, and he is, the provider and all of those things. Do you feel that there's now an additional pressure upon you to now go into that realm of a husband?
Honestly, no, because I feel like I've been preparing to be a husband before anyone came along. So in terms of learning what it means to be a husband, in terms of the practical things, finances and those kind of things, I'd been working on putting those things in place, and always speaking to friends about their marriage and asking questions and being inquisitive to help prepare me. So I didn't really feel the pressure when that stage came, but I'm also aware that I can't be naive and know that there's going to be things that I won't understand until I experience them.
Right. Fantastic. I think we're kind of, I've taken up enough of your time now. One question I want to finish with is, can we expect another book?
Funnily enough, I was thinking about this earlier today. I have like 2 or 3 book ideas that I've started on. And I think the short answer is maybe, possibly, or maybe. Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, Pastor Kunlé, thank you. Thank you for opening up. Thank you for waiting, because I remember saying to you, when you're ready, we need to do this interview. And I've actually felt quite honored in being part of the waiting game, if that makes sense. And then getting that message and that call saying, I've done it, we're engaged, and how incredible the journey has been. But thank you for opening up and sharing. I really think the listeners are going to glean a lot from this. I don't know if there's anything that you want to add, but for me, certainly, I think you've given us a lot to think about and a lot of, maybe checkpoints as well. I think coming from a pastor's point of view does add definitely a different dynamic, because there's a responsibility that you carry that many of us don't, as we have our own ministries, but I think being a shepherd really carries quite a heavy mantle. So thank you for opening up and for sharing. And is there anything that you would like, any message you would like to give to the listeners, or anything you'd like to add that would help and encourage those who are on a similar journey, or who are in their singleness looking to be in the position that you're in now?
Absolutely. I would just say keep going. I've had a lot of people who said they've been encouraged by the fact that I've been able to find a spouse even without giving up the pursuit, and as time has gone by. So I would just say to people, don't give up, continue to be intentional, ensure that you're accountable, and just go out there, enjoy the process, and with the grace of God, in His timing, all will be made well according to the desires of your heart. And I thank you also for having the opportunity, or giving me the opportunity, to do this interview. I've told my fiance we won't do many during the first stages of our marriage that we can just learn and grow. But I was committed to definitely doing this, and happy to do any others that would be a benefit to the listeners with yourself, because we are both grateful for you and the words of wisdom that you've been able to give to me and to us along this journey. And so just really happy to be a guest on this podcast, and would just encourage others, as I say, to keep going.
You know I'm going to hold you to that, because you said it earlier on in the podcast and you said it again. So that's an actual official booking now. I will be interviewing, if not her on her own. I'm really struggling to not say her name. Even if it's not her on her own, then definitely the both of you, or maybe both of those things. But I really would, and I think the listeners would love to hear her side of the story as well, because quite often the male and female version can be quite different. But I would love to hear what she has to say. So I'm taking that as a confirmed booking. I'm just going to come back to you after the details, times and dates. But thank you so much. As I said, we're going to sign off now. Listeners, if you have any comments, how can people reach you if they want to? How will they know where your church is, Pastor Kunlé? I've been to the church. I loved it. It was probably, for my husband and I, we were, from the moment we parked our car out on the street in the pouring rain, we were welcomed by one of your members and taken to where we needed to be, and we were looked after and loved and fed, and just really the hospitality was out of this world. So if you are looking for a church in central London, definitely consider the Cornerstone Church. It's a very vibrant church. Love it. So how can they reach you? Where are you? How could they get in contact with you if they need to?
Bless. Thank you very much. So on Instagram, we are tcornerstoneC. On the internet, we are thecornerstone-church.com, and that will also link to all of my personal handles and personal website as well.
Fantastic. And obviously the address of the church would be on any of those contact points, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay, great to talk to you. Listeners, thank you for listening in. If you have any comments, depending on what platform you're listening from, you can leave comments and you can message me directly if there's anything more that you need to know or want to know. Until then, take care and stay safe.